Hello, I'm Emma Mudge, the English Education Advisor at Services for Education. I also work as a Key Stage 2 writing moderator on the Key Stage 1 assessment team, and I'm part of the safeguarding team as well. This webinar today is going to look at how we teach writing to our very youngest writers. We'll spend time focusing upon the national curriculum expectations, and we'll identify necessary in-class approaches and strategies. All too often we get distracted by the expectations of school curricula and schemes, or sometimes by SLT as well, when what we really need to ensure is that we fulfil the requirements of the national curriculum and Ofsted's expectations. So let's have a little look at what these actually are. In their recent subject report, Telling the Story, which was released in March 2024, Ofsted commented on a range of identified areas in writing, particularly early writing, in which schools can improve their pedagogical approaches and their provision. Let's take a little look. They said that primary pupils are not given sufficient teaching and practice to become fluent with transcription early enough. They said that the writing curriculum often introduces complex tasks far too early, before many pupils are equipped with the necessary knowledge and the skills that underpin these. They also said that some schools see the end point as the mode of practice. So, for example, writing more stories to get better at writing stories. What this means is that pupils who are not secure in the foundations of writing are being asked to complete tasks that they are not ready for. And finally, they say that schools need to ensure that pupils who are in the early stages of learning to write and older pupils who are not fluent in transcription practice transcription skills in isolations, talking about interventions there. So the key elements which are constantly re-emphasised throughout that document are the importance of transcription practice and the tendency for schools and teachers to overly complicate the writing task presented to our young writers. Let's take a little look at some of these messages in just a bit more detail. Of course, writing can be split into two separate areas, transcription and composition. Let's first take a little look at what they said about transcription. They said that some schools have the misapprehension that focusing on foundational knowledge and writing lowers the ambition of their curriculum. So Ofsted are clearly telling us here that the challenge and ambition in our writing curriculum should be focused upon the foundational knowledge, the writing basics as it were. We don't need to overcomplicate it. Learning to write is by far challenging enough. They also said that schools do not use dictation regularly as a way of practicing transcription without overloading pupils' working memory. So here it's recognised that those two elements of writing, transcription and composition, should be separated when teaching new writing knowledge. And this is especially important in Year 1 when they are beginning this process. Dictation is a great tool for enabling children to practice new grammar, punctuation and spelling without having to think about what to write. In many schools, the reception and Year 1 curriculum do not sufficiently emphasise the need for pupils to learn how to hold a pencil correctly and comfortably and sit at a table to write. Weaknesses in letter formation and pen grip make it difficult for pupils to learn to join their handwriting and can be significantly harder to address at a later stage. So here we can see the importance of the very earliest stages of writing, i.e. holding a pencil, and how we need to prioritise this in Year 1 so that bad habits aren't able to form. In some schools, pupils in Year 1 and beyond who have not mastered pen grip or accurate letter formation are being asked to compose stories. Now here, although Ofsted are talking about handwriting, the focus is actually upon the tendency for us to overcomplicate the tasks that we give to the children, and that the fundamentals of writing should be prioritised before composition. Let's now take a little look at what Ofsted said about composition. Oral composition, such as retelling a familiar story, is not often seen as an end goal. This means that pupils at the earliest stages of learning to write have limited opportunities to practice, which in turn affects their ability to write coherently. This is because they are not given sufficient time to plan and consider sentence construction, grammar, or vocabulary orally before being asked to write. This is once again an example of how Ofsted are identifying the need for separating those two areas of writing, transcription and composition. A great tool for achieving this when focusing upon composition skills, such as vocabulary choice or sequencing, for example, is oral composition. It is recognised here that we need to ensure that our oral composition is identified as a learning goal in itself, and that transcription may not be necessary when we are focusing upon compositional skills. The next quote is an example of good practice which is given in the review. Oral composition in this school continued to play a significant role in English beyond reception, ensuring that pupils could create complex narratives verbally. Pupils were not rushed into composing complex written compositions before they were ready. The successful school in this instance maintains oral composition as a pedagogical approach to teaching writing composition, and that this isn't simply a tool which is confined to early years. Okay, so we've heard about what Ofsted had observed in 2024 and what they expect good practice to look like. Let's now take this opportunity to have a really focused look at what the National Curriculum for Year 1 says. The following quotes are from the page before the programme of study, which provides an overview of the learning and expectations for English in Year 1. You can see in this first quote that there is an understanding from the national curriculum of just how challenging learning to write is. It says that it will develop at a slower pace than their reading. It also identifies that the transcription skills are what needs to be focused upon at this stage. With this second quote, we can see that we're talking about those children who have not yet met those early learning goals for literacy, and it identifies that we as Year 1 teachers must continue with the EYFS curriculum for reading, spelling and language for those specific children. However, these pupils should follow the Year 1 programme of study in terms of the books that they listen to and they discuss. So there is still a real focus here upon maintaining the Year 1 expectations for the text exposure. So it's beyond that which they are capable of reading themselves. And also the expectation of following the Year 1 curriculum for spoken language. We must encourage all pupils to discuss the text, the themes, the author intent, the vocabulary choices, etc. There is then the recognition that, because writing is a challenging and a complex skill, that some children may still struggle with basic transcription skills, and if this is the case, then they need to be taught to do this urgently. They need to do it as a highly prioritised intervention, and we can see that the wording from the national curriculum here is urgent. Right. So let's move on to the meaty part of the national curriculum, the programme of study for Year 1. This details specifically what needs to be taught. This is statutory, and we should be focusing upon developing fluency in all of these elements that you can see on the slide now, rather than moving pupils onto more complex skills, even if they're more able. So here at the top you can see we have the spelling. And you can see how much this links to your phonics teaching and the basic requirements of knowing the alphabet and how this links to spelling as well. We also have some basic prefixes and suffixes, simultaneously developing spelling and vocabulary development. Towards the bottom of the spelling section, we have a reference to the spellings in Appendix 1, We won't be looking at this today, so please make sure that you are familiar with it. In there are the necessary revision work there from EYFS, the links to taught phonemes, and the necessary common exception words which pupils need to be able to spell, such as the, said, your, etc. And finally, there's a specific reference to dictation, so that pupils can practice those spellings within the context of a sentence without being overburdened with composition. There is also a specific emphasis upon the challenges of spelling, encoding in comparison with decoding in the non-statutory guidance. It says it's important to recognise that the phoneme-grapheme correspondence here underpins the spelling, and it's more variable than grapheme-phoneme correspondence. And so for this reason, pupils need to do more rehearsal for spelling than for reading. Also in the non-statutory guidance, there is further identification of the importance of dictation, which you can see here in this final quote. In Year 1, the National Curriculum Programme of Study for Handwriting starts very much at the beginning, despite the fact that pupils will have been beginning to learn to write in EYFS. We need to remove any bad habits which may have already been developed, and we need to ensure that we and the children focus upon their posture and their pencil grip as a first point for action. We then need to look at the actual formation of the letters, both lowercase and capital, ensuring that letters begin and end at the correct places. There is no mention here of descenders or of ascenders or of letter size, although of course it would be expected that this is modelled and taught about by the teacher. Digits are also included in this. Those tricky numbers which are often written back to front need to be addressed. And there also needs to be teaching around letter families, so A, C, D, G, O and Q, for example. The non-statutory guidance states that handwriting requires frequent and discreet direct teaching, and interestingly, that left-handed pupils should also receive specific teaching to meet their needs. Okay, so let's now have a little think about the compositional teaching in Year 1. As you read through this, notice how much emphasis there is in the national curriculum upon spoken language. Every point here, apart from the sequencing sentences one, refers to the pupils reading their writing out loud or saying it out loud. Our focus needs to be upon this and building towards all pupils, by the end of Year 1, being able to write some sequenced sentences which are readable by others through the process of oral composition, rereading and discussing. The non-statutory guidance also emphasises these points. You can see from those two quotes there that these show the writing development through the course of the year and the importance of the teacher modelling, demonstration and discussion when it comes to composition. The final aspect of the Year 1 writing programme of study is focused entirely upon vocabulary, grammar and punctuation. Remember, we want all pupils to be able to achieve this by the end of Year 1. Spaces between words, using and, beginning to use basic punctuation, beginning to, capital letters for proper nouns and I. And then the other elements within this section are focused upon the detail that's in Appendix 2, which we'll look at in the next slide. So this is the Year 1 content from Appendix 2. And as was stated in the previous slide, we want children to learn, understand, and use all of this in their writing. The specific terminology that we want pupils to be using when they are talking about writing is in that last row in the table, so letter, capital letter, word, etc. You can clearly see in this appendix how it provides further explanation about the concepts that we've already looked at in the programme of study itself. So now let's pull together some of those key messages from the national curriculum and Ofsted for us to summarise. First of all, we've got to focus on spelling. We've seen this message consistently through the documentation. Spelling must be taught alongside your phonics teaching, And you need to have an awareness that the writing of the phonemes is more challenging than the reading of them. So there needs to be regular practice and support with interventions for those who continue to struggle as and when necessary. Handwriting. This must be an area of priority for any Year 1 teacher. We need to eradicate any bad habits and make sure that they don't form in the first place, and support young writers with their fine motor skills and their formation of letters. Remember to specifically support any left-handed writers. Punctuation. This is that basic punctuation which is identified in the programme of study. Full stops, capital letters, question marks and exclamation marks. Remember the repeated phrases that were there, beginning to and an introduction to. Pupils might not yet be able to apply all of this teaching in their own writing. Of these 4, we need to specifically spend time upon capital letters and full stops because this links both to our handwriting targets and also our compositional areas of focus. In composition, we must focus upon the children writing their own sentences. So does the sentence make sense? Is it readable? Are there spaces between the words? Is there a capital letter and a full stop? The next stage in this is the child producing a number of sentences, and this therefore has to be sequenced accurately so that the simple narrative or recount or character description, whatever it is they're doing, would make sense to a reader. And finally, in grammar and vocabulary, we need to ensure that we use the correct terminology and encourage metacognition of writing, i.e. talking about writing, writing purpose and author choice. Make sure that these elements of your teaching link into the areas that we've already identified on this slide. To conclude this free webinar, I'm just going to highlight some of those key strategies for you to use in your teaching, which we've identified and Ofsted and the national curriculum are identified as being good practice. Phonics. Too often we see phonics as being critical for developing reading, and it is, but as we've already seen, it's also crucial for developing writing, especially spelling. Make sure that you link the decoding with encoding and that you provide plenty of opportunities for pupils to practice applying their newly learnt phonemes in their own writing. Dictation. This strategy is massively underused. Enables pupils to apply spelling, grammar and punctuation learning without creating cognitive overload by asking the children to compose at the same time. Oral composition. We could see that focus upon this in the national curriculum's writing composition section. Pupils must be expected to orally compose before they write their own sentences, and this can and should be considered an outcome in its own right. Teacher modelling. This is critical. Pupils need to hear the teacher orally compose, to select the vocabulary that works, to see the application of spelling, handwriting and punctuation, and to reread what has been written. It is through this that pupils can understand the purpose of writing. Writing from real experiences isn't explicitly mentioned in the national curriculum, but it is in the non-statutory writing teaching assessment framework for the end of Key Stage 1. Now this is because, again, we take off some of that compositional pressure that's on pupils by asking them to write from real experiences. And that could be a curriculum experience, for example, or a visit. Sharing texts. Sharing texts which are beyond the individual pupil's reading ability is critical for all children's language development, their understanding of stories and composition, and their recognition of purpose and author choice. Make sure that the texts you choose are varied and engaging for all children. Remember that the sharing of text needs to be combined with oral and visual storytelling as well. And finally, the element which underpins all of this, spoken language. Spoken language is the linchpin of any English curriculum, and therefore discussion, modelling, rereading, and crucially drama is the foundation of any good quality teaching of writing. That brings us to the end of this session. Thanks for watching this webinar, and I really hope you found it useful. If you want to contact us, then please use the email that's on the screen now. Any further information on all aspects of services for education support for schools and education settings can be found on our website that's shown here, or you can follow us on X. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.